In 1945, a poor black mother from Georgia was strapped into the electric chair, convicted of killing the man who beat, imprisoned, and controlled her. 60 years later, the state admitted she had been wronged. This is the story of Lena Baker, the tragedy of a woman failed by her time, and the justice that arrived far too late. Lena Baker was born on June 8, 1900, in Cuthbert, Georgia, a small town in the heart of the Jim Crow South. She grew up in a world where segregation was written into law, where poverty was not an accident but a system, and where black women's voices were rarely heard, much less believed. From an early age, Lena learned the weight of survival. She worked wherever she could, washing, ironing, scrubbing floors, doing whatever was necessary to put food on the table for her 3 children. She was a mother first, a provider second, and often both at once, working long hours for pennies. Despite these hardships, she leaned on her faith. Church was her anchor, prayer her daily ritual, and her neighbors, though often struggling themselves, formed a fragile but important safety net. But in 1944, Lena's life would take a turn from difficult to unbearable. A white mill owner named Ernest Knight broke his hip and hired her to care for him. At first it seemed like another caretaking job, ordinary and temporary. But soon what looked like employment became captivity. Knight kept Lena locked inside his gristmill, under threats, humiliation, and abuse. Witness accounts later described not just confinement, but control. Knight dictated where she went, when she left, and whether she received pay at all. It was not simply about labor, it was about power. In the South of the 1940s, for a black woman to resist a white man's authority was to risk violence, imprisonment, or worse. Lena tried to leave. She confided in friends about the threats. She reported her fear. But every possible path out carried enormous danger. Her situation was the definition of a trap. Stay and suffer, or resist and risk everything. On one April evening in 1944, that trap snapped shut. Knight allegedly threatened her with a length of iron. In the struggle that followed, Lena seized his pistol and fired one shot. The man who had held her captive was dead. What Lena did next says everything about her faith in truth. She did not run. She did not hide. Instead, she walked straight to the sheriff's office and confessed what had happened. She believed honesty would protect her. She believed that if she explained, the system would listen. But in Jim Crow, Georgia, a black woman's truth was rarely heard. She was arrested and charged with murder. Though the law allowed for self-defense, the courtroom of 1940s Georgia did not always recognize it, especially when the victim was white and the defendant was a black woman. Lena asked for a lawyer, but the one she received had little time or resources to prepare. The trial lasted only a single day. 12 white men made up the jury. They listened, they deliberated briefly, and they returned with a verdict: guilty of capital murder. The sentence: death. Historians emphasize not only the speed of the trial, but the atmosphere in which it unfolded. Domestic abuse was not a recognized offense. The racial hierarchy of the South meant that Lena's testimony carried almost no weight. The verdict, in many ways, had been decided before she ever set foot in that courtroom. After the trial, Lena was transferred to Reidsville State Prison, where she waited for execution. In her cell she wrote letters to her children, encouraging them to stay strong and to cling to their faith. Ministers visited her, prayed with her, and carried her words back to her family. Appeal after appeal failed. Each passing week brought her closer to the machine locals grimly called Old Sparky. On the morning of March 5, 1945, Lena dressed in white. Guards escorted her into the chamber. Witnesses recalled her calmness, her faith unshaken even in the face of death. Her final words were simple yet devastating. "What I done, I did in self-defense. I have nothing against anyone. God has forgiven me. I am ready to meet my God." At just 34 years old, Lena Baker was executed by the state of Georgia. She left behind 3 children and a grieving mother who never stopped insisting that her daughter had only acted to save her life. In her community, Lena's story was passed down quietly, in whispers, in family stories, in church pews. For decades, outside of Cuthbert, her name was little known. But as historians revisited her case, the truth became harder to ignore. Through the lens of racial injustice, gender inequality, and the reality of domestic abuse, her trial looked tragically flawed, rushed, biased, and blind to context. In 2005, the Georgia Board of Pardons and Paroles issued a posthumous pardon. Could not bring Lena back. It could not return the years stolen from her children. but it admitted at last that the state had failed her. The pardon was a confession, an acknowledgement that Lena Baker had been punished not for murder, but for surviving. Her story forces us to ask painful, urgent questions. Who is believed in a courtroom? Who is protected under the law? And how often are women, especially women of color, punished for saving their own lives? Lena Baker's story is not just history. It is a mirror, a reminder that justice is not automatic, that truth can be silenced, and that the struggle for fairness is never over. Thank you for honoring Lena's memory with your time. If her story moved you, share it so others may know her name. Support organizations that fight for equal justice and protect survivors. Echoes of Time. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.